Sometimes I don't.
Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the special joint workshop of the Highland Village City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is the City Council version of calling the meeting to order, and now Chairman Skinner will call the P&Z to order.
Yes, I'll call the P&Z to order at 5:03, and we have four of the commissioners here.
And I'll make a note that all council members are present with the exception of Mr. Feaster, who is, or Mr.
I'm here,
Oh, you're
actually.
here. Where's Tom?
You may not know that, but I'm
He's here, but he's not here.
restroom.
Okay, so all council members are present with the exception of Mr. Heslop, who knows where he is.
He's in the building.
He's in the building.
He'll be here, though.
He's scoring that touchdown for.
I have a brief, I shouldn't say brief. I have a statement I'll put into the record. I'll read into the record just for everybody in attendance, just to kind of lay some groundwork for tonight's meeting. Before we get started, I just want to provide an overview of not only our process for tonight, but also the process we've undertaken to develop these plans. By the end of our meeting, we should have firmed up the next steps. Tonight is a public workshop for Council and Planning and Zoning to receive a presentation from McAdams on the rough draft plans and to discuss and provide guidance on opportunity areas. Public comments are not included in this meeting. However, there will be the opportunity for public comments at future meetings as we move through the process. And I ask that everyone be respectful of others during tonight's meeting. The meeting is available to watch live on www.highlandvillage.org/HVTV, Frontier Channel 43, and at www.youtube.com/HighlandVillageTX. The meeting will be recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing on the city website and the YouTube channel. We were presented with the need to update these plans in late winter 2021 at a council planning session. Updating these planning documents and creating new master plans is an important and detailed process. With only a few parcels of land left to develop, it is important that the city be deliberate in ensuring future development is fiscally beneficial and enhances our quality of life. City staff began an internal process of reviewing current plans and developing the request for proposals to hire and collaborate with a firm for the development and update of these plans. The request for proposals was issued on April 5th, 2021, with proposals due May 14th. The city reviewed the proposals and received presentations from the three selected consultants at the end of June 2021. The city unanimously selected McAdams because of their familiarity with Highland Village and the region, along with the expertise of the staff in North Carolina, particularly related to parks and open space master plans. The contract was approved with McAdams at its city council meeting 1 year ago on September 28, 2021. At that time, staff began working with McAdams to develop the timeline and process. Council received a presentation from McAdams at our January 26 meeting detailing the process. These types of projects are accomplished in phases. The first phase of the project was the community input phase, where we held an all-day open house in conjunction with the Highland Village Business Association Community Coffee, and online engagement, which was open for a month. Between these three opportunities, we received comments from over 300 residents. Input from property owners, staff, and council was also included. 2 specific focus groups were held to gather input from users of our trail system and from the teens of Highland Village for needed park and recreation opportunities. A statistically valid survey was also part of the project and was sent to 300 random residents in Highland Village. The second phase was the envisioning phase, where McAdams gathered all the information provided in the community engagement, meetings with property owners, a resident survey, and an economic market analysis to develop the planning documents. We're now in the final phase of this process with the review of the rough draft plans, council and planning and zoning input, and then sharing the plans with the public before council approves by ordinance at an upcoming meeting. As you can see, this has been a thorough and detailed process. As we look to the future, it is important we consider all new projects and development with the mindset of fiscal responsibility, our community needs, and enhancements to our quality of life. Community input is an important part of this project, which is why it was included at the start. Tonight, we are here to receive the presentation of the rough draft plans and for council and planning zoning to provide input.
Real quick, I see a few folks standing over here. There's some chairs over here if y'all be more comfortable over here. So, okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Stewart with McAdams. Thank you for having us here. I want to thank the council and P&C members for their hospitality and opening this up. And we're looking forward to presenting where we are after, as Mayor Jaworski mentioned, a year-long process to get to this point where we are tonight. I want to introduce our team that have been instrumental, and this is just part of the team. We've probably had about 30, 35 people overall working on it. A high-level team of 6, a next-level team of 6 or 7 more, and then some support staff. So this evening, I want to introduce Ashton Miller. He is with our in our Dallas office, and he is in our planning department. Next is Eric Wilhite. Eric is out of our Roanoke office, and he is our the Civic Spaces Director for DFW for McAdams. And then next in line is Rachel Cotter. Rachel's out of our North Carolina office, and she is our Civic Spaces Director for McAdams. And so throughout the evening, you'll be hearing from each one of them, and I just wanted to introduce them before. Mayor Jaworski, thank you for that detailed introduction. That shortens mine a little bit, giving the timeline and how we got to where we are today. But the main intent of today is to transition from all the work that has been done to a final review, and then after the final review, in about a month from now, the council will come together and vote on the acceptance for the project. The agenda for this evening is first the introduction. Oh, I guess I need to move it forward. Our planning process, our community engagement, planned content, recommendations, and we want to leave plenty of time for discussion. One thing I do want to start with on the planning process is what were we charged to do through the RFP that Mayor Jaworski talked about. So these words are directly from there. Highland Village is quickly approaching build-out, 97% build-out at this point. A complete comprehensive plan update is not needed. This is not a complete comprehensive plan that we're presenting tonight. It's an update of various sections of the overall comp plan. We were asked to focus on the vacant tracts and how it can foster new development and redevelopment. We were asked to, we were asked to look at the future development and consider how staffing will be balanced with resource needs to maintain the high level of service. And as you recall from our last meeting, at least in the parks analysis, that Highland Village has a very high service level for that particular program, along with sustainability and affordability. How can the city move ahead with what tracks are left, with the future tax base, and be able to have sustainability and affordability for our citizens? I've lived in Highland Village for 30 years, so I've come through quite a bit. Whenever 407 was a 2-lane road and I had to drive to Louisville to get groceries and drag my twins along for grocery shopping every Monday morning. And so in the past, we've already had a comp plan, but now we are updating it. And the reason is things change. We all know the shopping environment has changed. Various things change, and so there's a constant need to update a comp plan. It's not a static plan. It's a moving plan over years, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then one of our other charges was maximizing the economic benefit and enhancing the quality of life. Those two things going hand in hand. The comprehensive plan is a policy document. It is a blueprint advisory document versus a code and law. You already have your zoning ordinances, your subdivision ordinances, and various codified ordinances. And this is a guiding document for how we, along with everybody in this room, the public and council and P&Z and staff, feel like we can create a guiding document for the future. It prioritizes goals and objectives. It verifies and resolves gaps in the current one. There is an analysis of community needs and wants, and we've got some great information on that. And as I go through tonight, I do want to remind you that we're giving a bunch of snapshots tonight. The entire document is about 500 pages, and we're giving you snapshots into that document. It is a 10-year work plan, and it's already been utilized to help Mr. Lorenzo apply for a grant for park funds. It is all the stakeholders involved will be in it, and really with the rest of that, it's utilizing the community to make decisions on where we, and I can say we, and actually I added up within our firm, I think it came to around 58 years of our employees that have lived in Highland Village, and many of them involved in this project. So when I say we, it's us who are citizens, and then utilizing McAdams' expertise and history to move forward. The comprehensive planning process, it takes into account the inventory and analysis, and as Mr. Jaworski said, this was a process. That was something that we did at the beginning, and you will see in the green box the community engagement. And then visioning and goals, synthesizing that information. What does the information mean collectively? Making recommendations. Last time we shared with this group the findings on what we had found over the previous 10 months. And then tonight we're going to talk about some of the recommendations, but we're also going to focus in on action and implementation. The 500-page document is a bunch of paper, and it really doesn't mean anything unless it's utilized, just like a book on your shelf. It doesn't do you any good until you read it, and if it's a self-help book, until you apply it. So tonight we're going to talk about how this document can be utilized and applied in the future. And as I said, it's a document that will continue to change, and we'll be talking about that over time. And really, this document, I kind of likened it to using your Google Map app. You want to go from place X to place Y, and it tells you with the dark blue line what's the best route. There might be 5 or other light blue lines, but you're going to take the dark blue line. Well, you're going along and you find out there's construction, and then the map needs to be re-examined, and it will redirect you to a new route. and you're almost there, and your kids are in the back seat going, "Dad, Mom, I'm hungry." So now you have to redirect again. So in life and in this document, things are going to change. You have to redirect. But the goal of this document is the same as when Highland Village was first founded, and that is, what are the benefits for the citizens of Highland Village? That goal is continuous, and that's the goal of this roadmap. What is the best for the city and the citizens? And there might be some redirection, but you just hit reroute, but the ultimate goal is the same. With that, I'm going to ask Rachel to come up, and Rachel's going to talk about, first she's going to talk about the community engagement process, and then she will move into the next topic. So Rachel?
Good evening. All right, so a little bit about our community engagement process. It was a very comprehensive process. We like to take a both broad and focused approach, so we hear all of the voices throughout the community. So we did this by facilitating several public input meetings, stakeholder groups. We met with appointed boards and officials. We had staff engagement. We completed a statistically valid survey, and we facilitated 3 focus groups. Altogether, this was 56 meetings. We also had a public input or a public opinion survey, different from a statistically valid survey, that was posted online for several weeks. So ultimately, again, the goal is to provide a really broad opportunity for several voices throughout the process. And then some of the highlights resulting from this engagement process. Just a few here. Again, the summary is in our report, but because it was so robust, we just wanted to highlight a few of the really exciting comments that we heard throughout the process that influenced the recommendations of this plan. So we heard that respondents love the appearance, views, and overall beauty of Highland Village, that residents believe maintenance of city streets and facilities should receive the most emphasis moving forward. 75% of respondents agree that sidewalks, walking paths, and trails should be part of the community vision. Residents say that they've lived in Highland Village because it's safe and has a small city atmosphere. They prioritize people in the community and the environment as community values. The majority of residents are satisfied or very satisfied with the majority of city services. Priorities for recreation amenities should be water access trails and an indoor recreation facility. And most residents are satisfied or very satisfied with major city services. So those are just a few of the highlights of the community engagement process that helped identify what the community values are here. We really wanted our plan to be grounded in the community values here in the city of Highland Village. One last thing, I think it's important to remember that a plan is really based or grounded in 3 things. One is community engagement, but the other is the availability of city resources, whether that's staff or funding availability. And then the third is the current times, the trends, the current events that are happening. So all 3 of those components feed into what our recommendations are for this plan. So a little bit about the plan context and components. We were asked to develop a few mini plans as the update to the comprehensive plan. The first was the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan. So as part of this, we looked at the demographic and trends. Oftentimes, the demographics of a community can give us insight into what recreation trends are and who we should be providing services for both now and into the future. We visited a representative sample of the parks. We completed a level of service and benchmarking analysis, a needs assessment, which is the community engagement and statistically valid survey, a program, financial, and operations assessment. So this was very comprehensive for the entire department, not just the physical facilities that you all see, but also programs and operations. And then we made recommendations and an action plan. A very similar process for the Trails Master Plan, looking at on-street bicycle and trail networks, prioritizing corridors, developing typical cross-sections, and then also the action and implementation plan. The Village Connection and Trail Corridor Amenity Plan update, looked at initial inventory and analysis. That's the first part of all of these plans, is to take a snapshot in time. Where are we, and compare it to the current comprehensive plan in place. Then do some field reviews and site visits, preliminary alignment and design, reviewing that with stakeholders, and then proposing a final conceptual alignment and design, which you'll see here today. We also developed some opportunity area plans for the remaining open parcels, vacant parcels here in town, in the city. We completed that initial inventory and analysis. We did a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis. We developed several concept scenarios and narrowed those down to some preferred concepts, completed cost estimates, and developed implementation strategies. And then finally, the Thoroughfare Master Plan, again, beginning with that inventory and analysis piece, developing traffic demand modeling, reviewing and coordinating with agencies such as the Department of Transportation and local transportation offices, reviewing ordinance and policies, and then making recommendations to the Thoroughfare Master Plan. So my specific area of focus on this plan was the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space component. When visiting your parks, we were thoroughly impressed with the level of quality, the diversity of recreation programs and offerings, and just the care and the concern that the department had, the commitment to parks and recreation as a service here in the city of Highland Village. In fact, one of the very surprising results of the scientific survey was that when asked what barriers to park use were, respondents actually said none. The majority of respondents said none were actively using the parks. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and this is the first time that I've seen that response. There's usually a barrier. So a really beautiful system here, but there are a lot of outdoor opportunities, programs, and amenities that are in demand. There are very detailed and expansive maintenance efforts already in place, although there could be additional funding and staff to support the maintenance of facilities and trails, opportunities to continue to modernize. So with very limited land to expand the park system or build new parks, a big focus of the plan is going to be continuing to modernize and enhance some of the amenities. So moving on to our recommendations, these are broken down into parks, programs, operations, and maintenance. So those three categories. So the first recommendation is to enhance the park system to continue meeting community needs. So much of this is related to the master plans for Copperas Branch and the improvements proposed at Pilot Knoll. Some of the most highly desired amenities are water access for water sports like canoeing, kayaking, and paddle boarding, and an indoor center. Right now we're seeing a lot of multi-generational centers, so you can meet the needs of a variety of ages, all recreating in one space together. So our second recommendation was to continue to provide high-quality park experiences through targeted improvements and upgrades. So this, again, is about modernizing the park system over time, moving forward, keeping things in not only well-working condition, but also continuing to receive feedback on the amenities and the things that people are looking for with modern facilities, always updating courts and fields with high-performing surfaces and developing design standards, so there is a brand here for the park system. Our third recommendation is to grow education and learning opportunities by way of recreation programs, activities, and facilities. So one of the community values that was highly prioritized was the environment and nature. So providing direct access to nature and to nature programming through enhancement of some physical spaces such as overlooks and educational kiosks, but also partnering with educators to develop some park programming around education of the environment. Maintaining and expanding an extensive greenway system. Trails was the #1 desired amenity by residents and respondents to the scientific survey. We did do an entire trails master plan update, so Eric is going to be speaking more specifically about that shortly. 3 more park recommendations. Establish visual cues to orient park and greenway users and establish brand recognition. So these are things like having a signage plan, consistent materials, and entrances and whatnot to the park system and the individual parks, so you can recognize it as a City of Highland Village park and the high-quality facilities that are provided here. So planning, designing, and constructing parks to promote wellness. This was another value, health and wellness. We all know that parks contribute to mental and physical health just by being out in nature. And so exploring partnerships to offer healthy food options and community gardens, expanding programming to address health and wellness. So things like Couch to 5K programs. And then as you're replacing or thinking about expanding amenities and opportunities physically in the parks, making sure that they are intended to promote physical and mental well-being. And then finally, enhance existing parks programming and events in the spirit of Highland Village's unique image. So we heard things like beauty and aesthetic and small town feel, small community and small city feel. There was certainly an emphasis on health, well-being, connection to nature, but also a real sense that it's one of the things that people love about Highland Village is a sense of community and bringing people together. So there are several ways listed here that we can truly bring people together in these civic spaces. So people, we say they live and work from their homes, but they live and sleep in their homes, but they really live in parks in these civic spaces. So from a programming perspective, we want to seek opportunities to offer programming that's in line with needs and wants. So that's an increased focus on the preschool age segment and active adult and senior populations. So that's where some of those things like the multi-generational facility and programming specifically targeted for active adults. They're not seniors anymore. They're really looking for things like pickleball. My mom is 71 and she's a Zumba instructor. So differentiating that age class as active adults versus our senior populations becoming more and more important. Implement the classification of services methodology. We go into a lot of detail in the plan. Phil and our consultant on the programming and financial component did develop some cost recovery goals that we'd be asked that the council consider adopting. But these really break down services into a value-added, important, and essential. And this is about how much of your programs you want to subsidize versus asking the community to provide fees for. And then finally, consistently collecting data to capture program participation, retention, and satisfaction. So things like intercept surveys, but also using your programs and your software to monitor performance of programs and just how you're doing as a service provider here in the city. And then finally, from an operations and maintenance perspective, again, one of the things that we noticed is this is a very highly performing, functioning department from an operations perspective. They're doing a lot with a little. There is some opportunity for increasing maintenance budgets for both the leased parks and the 4B park maintenance for trail maintenance to potentially increase the number of maintenance workers by 2. And to expand the usage of CityWorks to document maintenance and asset replacement schedules. Also to complete a compensation and wage study every 3 to 5 years to ensure that wages are competitive and attract highly skilled employees. There's a lot of competition right now with third-party providers for recreation, so you want to make sure that your wages and your compensation are going to attract the best and the brightest in recreation to provide those services to your residents. And with that, I will turn it over to Eric to talk about the Trails System Plan in greater detail.
Good evening. As Rachel mentioned, one of the high priorities in the survey was trails, which isn't too surprising. That normally happens. So within the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the comp plan is a trail system master plan that we've developed. The master plan has a network of recommendations. What you see on this exhibit here is an indication of the solid lines or the trails that exist now. And then the dashed lines are trails or on-street bike networks that are proposed. The main goal of the Trail Master Plan is to improve connectivity to existing parks, close the gaps of some of the existing trails that exist now, connectivity to schools and residential areas. In looking at the trail system that's there now and then what could be proposed, there are some recommended priorities. Those are shown up there. There's trail facility priorities that are listed. There's about 6 of those that can be looked at. Those are just listed. They don't necessarily have to happen in that particular order, but they're probably the more high priorities that could happen sooner rather than later and have the most significant impact on the trail system. And then the on-site bicycle facilities, we looked at with a thoroughfare master plan that was being done, different on-street bicycle facilities that can happen to help create connectivity with the off-street trail system as well. And that's shown on there. On the purple kind of shows the areas around the schools. So there's some connectivity and distance to trailheads and to existing trails and proposed trail system. So if there's any questions on that, when you look into it a little deeper, we can answer those.
I do have one question, if you don't mind, if I can interrupt. On the west side of 2499, the area, I guess it's south of the railroad, the roads are highlighted, where the rest of the sections do not have highlighted streets. Is that representative of sidewalks? What is the purpose of the highlight?
On the west side of 2499,
south of the railroad
track.
Yes.
That is currently a trail connection that is under design. Is that
No.
correct, Phil?
I think the legend does show it's sidewalks, because I think you can see it in,
Yeah, that's what I
Other
can't see,
areas.
if it's a sidewalk. That's the only neighborhood we have that has sidewalks then.
There's a few others on the east side, but yeah,
Yeah.
very few.
Okay, but that is representative of the sidewalks then?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Next, Ashton is going to come up and talk to us a little bit about the opportunity area plans. And as you know from our last meeting, there was quite a bit of interaction on that. And so he's going to give us an update on where we are after listening to y'all.
Good evening, Council and Commission. As Ron said, my name's Ashton Miller. I'm a planner with McAdams. So whenever we started this process of looking into what equals 3% of the total land area of Highland Village, we wanted to start this process by taking the evaluation that each piece of property that's designated as an opportunity area, that our goal is to maximize the economic benefit for Highland Village and its residents, as well as enhancing the quality of life for the residents of Highland Village. So what you'll see is Opportunity Area 1, the northern corridor, as you're heading south from Denton. So we did change this plan from the previous version that you saw. What we presented was very user-specific. I think we showed a food court on or a food hall on the northern portion of the property, and high-rise towers for residential condos for sale, things like that. And we wanted to take a step back and redesign this in a way that provides for maximum amounts of flexibility as a development or a proposal is made on this property in the future. So what you'll see is this plan maintains a maximum amount of flexibility to allow for development to occur. There's flexibility for the type of residential product that can fit on this property. We want to maintain a consistent buffer along FM 2499. And one thing that's very important is the residents that live along the southern property line. We want to create a buffer of land uses as you're heading north along this property. And one thing that I spoke to during our first meeting was this property isn't currently served by sanitary sewer. They have to come across the bridge. So the type of density and the type of development has to stimulate the amount of revenue to justify basically extending that sanitary sewer line. So to move forward with Opportunity Area 2, there were no changes from what you saw during our work session to this plan. We are proposing to, these two plans propose to keep the existing entitlements that are on the property today.
Real quick, can we just go back to Opportunity Area 1?
Sure.
Please? So I know that there was some discussion with regards to the high-rise towers. How are those replaced?
So those in the area where there was previously the towers, which were at first contemplated to capture those views of the lake. So the purple area is now a hypothetical of a residential product, whether that be age restrictive types of living, some sort of urban wrap type of product. And so this is just one possible scenario of how it could develop and to show how something like that could fit on this property.
What's urban wrap?
Urban wrap is that's a type of product that essentially the residential units wrap around a garage. So that's what an urban wrap is.
Okay.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how many stories would you be anticipating the urban wrap to be? Because I know that when I was reading through the updated plan, there was mention of focusing on the views of the lake, which
Sure.
would indicate height of a building.
Mm-hmm.
So with regards to the urban wrap here, how many stories would you anticipate?
In order to really see the view, it's set back quite a ways because of the 537 line that the Corps has established. So I would anticipate, maximum of 4 to 5 stories in this area in order to get those views of Lake Louisville. And there is quite a bit of tree canopy that exists right there as well, so that's one thing to consider.
And also in this area, you've got types of residential product, mixture of uses of residential. You focused on residential. Did you take any retail or did you look at any retail opportunities in this area?
Yes, all of the red buildings and the orange buildings that you see, those are, the red buildings are retail restaurant type of built-to-suit users. And then the orange buildings that you see that wrap around the existing pond that's on the property, those are full-service restaurants.
Okay.
Any other? Yes, sir.
Just a couple questions. Just on this exhibit, the yellow line, is that the flowage easement?
That's the current property boundary.
The yellow line?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then the green area north of that, at the far north end, is not the property is not included in this property?
Everything east of that yellow line is not part of this property.
Isn't it core?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, but just to be clear, the green area north of that yellow line is
Core.
There is the trail connection that goes up to the park that we would propose some sort of cross-access connection point from that northern park area into this development. So that's what you see with that access
You see where the
drive.
yellow line's going up?
Talking
yellow
about the
line.
green space between the words flowage easement and the yellow property line. And you've
That's
got
what
a-
he's talking about.
You're right there, yeah.
Yeah. Is that not core land?
Yes, that is.
That's core land. Okay, that answers the question. Thank you.
It was my question, though, but thank you. No. Second question is, I forget, how big is this property, roughly?
This one is, I think, 32 acres.
Is there any consideration that, of that 32 acres, how many acres is just not feasibly developable by any future developer? Either due to the grades, the tree coverage,
There's quite a bit of, over 50% of this property is covered with tree canopy. So what this plan shows is that some of those trees would be removed. And one thing that you'll see with each of these opportunity areas, there is an introduction section. We do a site analysis, which Ron and Rachel spoke to. We did a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for each one of these different opportunity areas. We ran financial implications as it relates to each of the preferred land use scenarios. We provide recommendations and then how to implement these plans moving forward. And the implementations section, to go into detail a little bit more about that as it relates to this entire section of opportunity areas. This document and these plans are one opportunity or one scenario that can happen and is a guide. This isn't zoning. This is a guide for how, whenever you are presented as a council and as a commission with an application on this property, to potentially, if you choose to refer back to it to see, what are a use like this? What are the tax benefits? What is the cost of services to the city? How could development occur and what are we getting? So you can evaluate it at that point if council and commission chooses to.
No, understood. I guess this is more for everybody on the boards. And I mean, even though we have 33 acres here, feasibly speaking, we may not be able to develop, roughly half of that without an extensive amount of investment by a developer. And the only way he's really going to get that back is by a higher percentage of residential than that we may be willing to entertain. So I just want to put that out there for us to consider. I mean, this is great if this were flat, right? But it's not flat and it's not bare. So I like it from a concept, but reality, bites, for lack of a better word. So just wanted to throw that out there.
But then my question would be, any developer that picks this up, they're going to recognize that and they're going to try to achieve maximum density. So density being non-residential is probably going to be a wraparound concept or some type of multifamily.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand at this point with this piece. So
Any other questions on this one? Okay, so opportunity area 2, we still have the same concept plans. We are showing a 2,200 square foot building that is just north of Torchy's. And we've got a drive-through coffee shop designed there as a hypothetical for something that could fit on that green patch of grass that's there. And then on the northwest corner of Walmart, there's a pad there that is we've designated and are showing as retail restaurant that is a 4,600 square foot building. Now to move forward, opportunity area 3. So this one we did modify slightly. We had initially 3 office buildings proposed on this one. We downsized it a little bit to 2 with a centralized open space in between the 2 buildings. And then another key thing is providing a setup for cross access to take place to the northern properties. And this one we had a lot. Yes, sir.
Was the Barnett property taken out of this? I thought there were additional opportunity areas off of Barnett.
There were, however, applications have been made, and so we were
Check it out.
asked, yes, sir.
Okay, so since all that, that planning and zoning denied that application, and so there's not an application anymore, although there could be at some point in the not-so-distant future. Would you care to speculate on what that area might be an opportunity for, given the fact that there currently is not an application?
You want to take a step at that, Ron?
Don't do it. Don't do it.
It's a loaded question, I know.
We would probably look at the existing zoning, and we feel like working within the existing zoning would probably be the best use for that property with how it's currently zoned.
Fair enough.
I believe is something we had discussed before.
Thank you.
Mayor, just for clarification, the property that is on the east side of Barnett is zoned mixed use, which is mixed use commercial, retail, things like that. That tract on the west side, where there was the proposed townhome development, is SF 40, which, as it is now, if you keep that same zoning, you can get about 3 houses on
Right.
that. So likely when that develops, some type of a zoning change would come forward.
Right. I just wanted to hear their opinion, given the fact that it's,
So with Paul's clarification, I will say our recommendation would be the zoning that's across the street, the mixed use. I had forgotten that little piece was separate. I was looking at the whole, for the most part, of Barnett. So again, it would be keeping it with whatever is along Barnett, the mixed use.
thank you.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
Any other questions on this one? Okay. Now, Opportunity Area 4, which is something we received a lot of feedback from, and Councilman Tom was very helpful on that one. So the interesting thing with this one, there's a lot of stubs that stub into this property, which lends itself for a phase type of approach based on the 3 different property owners that currently own this, which we met and we heard from all of them. They all kind of have different timelines of development, of if they even want to do anything on the property. So this concept plan that you see is could be come to fruition through a phased approach. And it's a single family type of development, which there have been proposals made on this to the property owners in the past, which, there hasn't been an application, that's come to fruition thus far. However, what we anticipate is some sort of phased approach based on the property owners' timeline. And what you see here is, something that is slightly denser than what is on the surrounding single-family homes. However, with what we evaluate with the price of land and what that yield would be for somebody to come in, they would have to put a product like this in order to make that property economically feasible. So Opportunity Area 5 is split between 3 different tracts. We've got the northern tract of Highland Village Road, and then we've got the southern tract of Highland Village Road. So one thing we heard after meeting with staff after our workshop is there should be some interaction with the Lake Louisville spillway and the body of water that's there. So what we're proposing is to remove the alley, so those would be front-loaded townhomes on the south side of Highland Village Road. And one thing to keep in mind with this property is we've got residents to the west. It is important to protect their interest and their homes that they currently live at. So what we'd like to propose is, and what we're recommending with the recommendation section of this one is landscape buffers. It's heavily landscape buffered along the western property line. And then there is an opportunity for parking along the cul-de-sac, which nestles itself by, again, the flowage easement. And then there's opportunity for people to bring their kayaks and kayak in that area, as well as a boardwalk pier area. And then there's been some slight modifications as well to the northern tract of this area. The hotel was actually flipped on the first one. We wanted to put the long side of the hotel facing 35 and facing Coppers Branch Road, which again, to protect the residents on the west side, there'd be a landscape buffer that should be proposed along the western property line. And then again, to kind of tie in the whole comprehensive plan, connection should be made to Coppers Branch Park, which is what you see on the northeast corner of that site, as well as one thing we're proposing, and you'll see an event pavilion. So if somebody wanted to host an event and their guests stay at the hotel, they could do that, and it could bleed over into Coppers Branch Park whenever that is developed in interaction with the lake. So that's one thing we wanted to maintain, is that connection. Any questions on this one?
Yeah, on the picture on the right-hand side, you show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 of those townhouses or condos down in the flood. See where the yellow lines go across the designated flood zone?
So
And is that not core area down there?
that area is not core. That's just floodplain area.
So then how do you plan to deal with FEMA, LOMAR, all that kind of stuff? Because developers have told me that I haven't seen this plan before, but they've told me that, man, that'd be a great area to do something like that. But to bring all that out of the flood is like lots of money.
It is there. I mean, the cost of development is expensive. And to work with the Corps is a multi-year process, and how you reclaim that area and the things you have to do.
Because you're just not going to deal with FEMA. You're going to be dealing with the Corps because they're going to have their finger in everything you do.
Sure.
Okay. Just want to clarify. Thank you.
And to move on to Opportunity Area 6, which is the only redevelopment site, we met with both property representatives, and so to speak to the east side of Selmeyer Lane, what we're recommending is encouraging support for facade improvements to be made to the building, allow for a reduction of the required number of parking, to allow for additional development to occur. This is the gateway into Highland Village as you're coming from Louisville on 407. So it would be a perfect opportunity for entry monumentation, an enhanced type of entry monumentation. We do have the existing Highland Village sign. However, what we're proposing is to get rid of the old bank drive-through, and then place a restaurant that sits on a park, which kind of gears you up as you're getting to Highland Village. The first thing you really see is a park, which is what everybody loves here in Highland Village. And then on the west side, we are just proposing to soften, again, facade improvements, as well as softening how that property looks from 407. So we're proposing essentially facade improvements and landscape improvements. Any questions on that one?
We have one question. I guess this is for Mr. Stevens on Opportunity Area 6, right? So last time we discussed, the property owner or, the leasing agency is really in no, unless they just want to donate all this stuff to the city, is really not interested probably in doing any enhancements to these properties. Do we have any vehicles or mechanisms where we can incentivize them to take some of these improvements on? Or are we just going to have to wait until whenever the properties become available, change hands?
And it may be a little bit of both. The property owner on the east side of Selmar, they were excited about the plan. They like the idea. They like the idea of being able to utilize part of that parking lot for additional retail. So if that were the case, I think that's easy to be able to do some other facade improvements within that one. The other one may be a little more difficult. With that frontage there, if we can do the trail along there, if we're looking at applying for grants, that may be an option to take care of some of that. There could also be some type of incentives for facade improvements as well.
Is the east side still owned by Henry S. Miller? Or did they sell it? Did they sell it too?
They sold it, and
It's in a trust
It's
now.
a family trust.
yeah, that's right.
And in light, in the same vein here on this two pieces, if we were successful in reimagining this, putting the green spaces in, what mechanisms do we have to keep it maintained, or would we have to install them at that point in time? Because currently, I don't think there's a lot that we can get them to do to water their grass or water their trees or do anything.
No, there's not. And part of it is, though, if they did the restaurant building out there, the requirement, the zoning requirements, subdivision requirements would come into play, which would make that have to meet landscape requirements and things like that. Some of that with the maintenance, there could be some shared costs and things like that to make sure those are maintained properly.
Is there anything that we can do to put in requirements for those to be maintained to a certain level? And again, this goes back to the look and feel of Highland Village. It looks for the parks, for everything.
We do have some requirements now in place to do that.
Right.
It's just a matter of enforcing those and making sure the landscape continues to meet the requirements that we have in place.
Well, thank you.
Paul, as far as incentives though, if we wanted to, couldn't we give them some type of property tax abatement incentive if we wanted to?
If you wanted to, yeah, theoretically, there's always a tax abatement, 380 agreements, some type of thing to incentivize
Because when you
things to take place.
When you think about it, the majority of the people that come into our city, that's the first thing they see. They see that nasty strip center on the west side, and then they see the almost had a cuss word slip out. Sorry. They see that ugly goody in that strip center on the east side, and if we could figure out a way to buffer that somehow and incent them in some way to do so, I think that would really greatly enhance the aesthetic beauty of our city.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the gateway from the east. And if people do drive through that, that's the first impression. So, and that is one of the ideas behind this, is to try to improve that and make that a better gateway into the city.
Quick question back on Opportunity Area 5. With regards... Whoa. So with regards to the hotel, do you have a sense of how many, the number of floors or rooms that would be required to make it financially feasible?
Typically, what we're seeing with hotels today in today's market is about 4 to 5 maximum. However, with the interaction with Copperas Branch Park, a small event type of venue could easily be something like a boutique hotel that is not one of the big national chains.
So you're talking like a loft or something like that, right?
Right, yes. But it's definitely something that should and could be contemplated on that property. It's something like a small business type of boutique hotel.
So on the other one to the right, the one on the southern part of where we're talking, because I know we talked last time about this concept, and I forget what the other one was that y'all offered, but any reason why restaurant there that would sort of feed into the hotel? Why that's not something that is a possibility?
Yeah, essentially I believe that there's only, I don't want to get, there's like 6 or 7 acres there that are developable. Maybe 4, as well as the amount of land area that something like a full service restaurant or a restaurant. I mean, you look over in Little Elm off of El Dorado, the interaction with the lake, there's a hula hut that's there with the cable park.
Right.
Those take up a lot of land area because of just the amount of traffic that they have and the parking that is required for those. So whenever you get to designing something like that that could have an interaction with the lake or a boardwalk type atmosphere, the amount of traffic that generates for a commercial type of development and the parking that's needed, it's very challenging. However, nothing is not doable, but it would be a greater challenge than something like what you see here. Sure.
And also on that particular site, as we mentioned earlier, we talked with all of the landowners who owned the properties. And one of he is motivated to have his property developed and move on. And from his research and our research and also our economic consultant, because there's no visibility from the freeway of that track because of the sound walls. Now, obviously, from the access road there is, but not from the freeway. Then it would be a pretty hard sell for something commercial or restaurant or something due to the lack of visibility.
Well, I wasn't talking about where the hotel is. I was talking about the one with the boardwalk. And there is no sound wall on that side, is there not?
No, it's
Okay.
it is the entire length along there.
Okay.
So both northbound and southbound. And we talked to TxDOT about signage, and they weren't really open to it. If the city were to allow like a 30-foot pylon sign, then maybe that would give some more visibility, but it would only be to the signage. Whereas with the hotel, the signage would be integrated into the hotel for that type of use.
Okay. So, and sticking with the picture on the right, my right, I know you talked to that particular property owner. Was there any conversation with the homeowners on Edgewood?
Well, the property on the right is actually two properties, and we talked with both of them at the same time to listen to what they thought and their experiences in the past of trying to sell their properties. And we didn't talk to the properties on Edgewood, because those it's our understanding those properties aren't up for redevelopment.
Okay.
So we only talked with landowners whose properties were undeveloped, other than Selmeyer. And so that's why we talked to those two property owners. Based on the history of this piece of property, we redesigned it, as Ashton said, to create a stronger buffer against the existing homes than we had in the previous one. And it really also, some of the history came into play with like a restaurant or a higher level use based on trying to be sensitive to some of the history that has happened on the property and the homeowners nearby.
And the last question I had is any of that in what is currently designated as the transit-oriented development zone?
Everything on the south is currently, Todd, transit-oriented development.
So is it y'all's recommendation that we leave that designation there, or you recommend that we remove the TOD designation and start from scratch?
The Todd will allow for this, and that we have not made a recommendation as per what you've said because of the Todd being fairly broad. If there's a expectation of some of the higher uses within the Todd, but yet that doesn't align with council for the higher uses, then you might want to reconsider the Todd. But right now, the Todd works with both of these, the north is not Todd, but
Right.
it definitely works with the south
Okay.
to be able to move ahead without a zoning change.
Okay.
And the zoning for the north side is what? Currently residential?
Yes,
Yeah.
SF10. And that has been SF10, well, I was going to ask Paul, but it's before Paul's day. Autumn, that was put in 15 or 16 years ago, as I recall? Yeah. So the intent of that landowner's zoning, he has not been able to fulfill that for about 15 years.
Right, okay.
I'm going to go ahead and move into the next section. And I'm glad we've had some questions, and we want to definitely leave some room for questions at the end. So I'm going to talk about the Village Connection. That is the FM 407 multimodal trail corridor. And we brought this to y'all a few weeks ago when we talked about it. And for implementation, we want to make sure that we're establishing a continuous pedestrian connection. And ultimately, the trail, multimodal trail connection to 12-foot, and to look at a multi-year phasing plan. And, oh, rats, it's still too small. We do have, and it will be in your documentation, we do have the 5-year plan, the 10-year, and the 20. The 5-year plan, just to summarize, is to have anywhere there is not currently a trail, is to fill those gaps with an 8-foot. The 10-year plan is to, where we can, take the 5s, 6s, and 8s up to 12 without redevelopment. And then the 20-year plan is twofold. It will require some redevelopment or some land acquisition or some legal agreements with property owners to allow an easement on their property, and then to take everything to the full 12-foot connection. And the other part of the 20-year plan is a trail connection all along the railway from 407 up to 2499. And it will be our experience and history, and I think Scott can concur with this, that would take the implementation of DCTA's potential plan to change this to a commuter rail. They've already started the public hearings. Is that correct, Paul?
They've hired a consultant to start the process.
Okay. So they have a consultant to study the potential for that rail line to either be commuter rail or shared commuter rail. And at that point, DCTA would be very open to having that trail connection, just as they have been in Denton along the connection from Lake Louisville up to downtown. So that's on the 20-year plan, not the 5 nor the 10.
That's assuming the trail along that railroad is assuming that there would be no freight on that railroad. That's the only way we can put a trail on there.
Now, Brian, I don't want to speak out of turn. That would definitely be true if it becomes a DCTA. If it becomes a shared line between DCTA and the rail line, I can't answer that question.
When you say shared, does that mean that there's still the existing one line of track, but it's used by DCTA and K whatever it is?
Kansas City Southern, but it's
Kansas City
Canadian.
Southern, or does that mean you're laying a second line of track that is for the transit?
One line.
So it's one line, so they coordinate schedules and all that kind of stuff, okay?
Yep.
And it would also, when I was working with DART 25 years ago, some of their initial lines were like that. So they had to have two kinds of equipment. They had to have their electrical driven trains, and then they also had to have some diesel trains because some of the lines were shared. And over the years, they have been, I'm not totally up on it, but I know they've converted some of those shared lines to solely DART lines.
And if you will, one more question, please. The 20-year plan calls for widening to a 12-foot rail, a 12-foot path.
Yes.
Is there a certain requirement for the 12-foot, or the multimodal, will it work with a 10-foot?
From our research, and particularly looking at golf cart communities, which would bring in the multimodal, there are communities that are operating at 12 feet for that. The national standard would be 14 to 16, but there's numerous communities operating at 12. And since it was going to be hard enough to get 12, then that was kind of the designation that we ended up on.
Kind of the goal.
Mm-hmm.
The 12-foot then would accommodate two patterns, if you will, to accommodate the width of the carts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the need for the 12.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And from our golf cart meeting that we had, you know, the city has some choices to make regarding where the state is now versus where the city is. And if the city wants to amend anything or go, you know what, we're happy with what we have. But the state has expanded, as we talked in our golf cart meeting, their speed limit and some of that.
Right. Thank you.
Are there opportunities connect to the trails of our surrounding cities?
The trail into Louisville off of 407 is currently truly a sidewalk. And we haven't had the meeting with Louisville yet, but we are going to. But that neighborhood has their masonry screening wall right on the right-of-way. So there's not going to be too much opportunity there. We do have other opportunities within the system to connect to Louisville, and that could certainly be a pedestrian access with a little bit of cajoling, it could maybe be bike, but a multi-use would almost be impossible there. And then we have multiple connections once we cross the railway with connections into Flower Mound. And then there is on the future trail map, there is a connection along Chin Chapel to our east. Right to our east, there's a little tiny corner that belongs to Flower Mound. And currently, as far as I recall, Copper Canyon does not really have any type of trail plan that we could connect to. But we do have multiple connections to Flower Mound.
I'm sure you mentioned this before, but help me again. On the 5 and 10-year plan, the reason for not laying 12-foot sidewalks is because we don't have the city doesn't have available access to the property, or what?
And that's a great question. We've had lots of discussion on it. In the 5-year, we had talked about going to 12-foot for wherever we have to make some connections, where there is no sidewalk right now. And there were two thoughts along that. One was putting that much money into a 12-foot, and there were certain areas that we can't put the 12-foot in because of restrictions within some of the adjoining properties. So we decided, well, let's go with 8 and maximize that, which is matching the Shops of Highland Village and Marketplace. Let's do as much 8 as we possibly can in the 5-year. And then in the 10, at that point, we can start looking at the 12 so that we can maximize resources and available money as quickly as we can.
I would think that probably your biggest hurdle would be down there by 7 Mile.
By Selmeyer?
7 Mile Cafe.
Oh, yes, there's a corner of Village Creek that, within the parking lot right in front of 7 Mile, that is it's really occluding the trail through there. So we can't do a 12 for sure through there. And to do an 8, it's going to require some retaining walls and whatever,
well, I guess
to make it happen.
What I'm driving at is do it now or do it later, but you got to do it if you're going to put a 12-foot in there.
Yes, and we did have the discussion to fill in all the gaps with a 12, and as I recall, when we were looking at the cost of that and the amount of additional monies to make that happen, we ended up with, well, let's defer the really expensive stuff till after the 5-year, and let's put in the continuation of the 8 as quickly as we can. And the 8 can be expanded in the future, and there's some parts of 6 that we can expand in the future. And so we will, in order to get to the connectivity from our east property line to our west property line within the quickest amount of time, we felt like 8-foot was the most economical and way to fast track that. and there were just, because of various things that are preventing 12 feet, such as it would either have to be redeveloped, or the city would have to buy land, or go through, well, we never talked condemnation, go through creating some legal documents, some of the landowners, to allow an easement. But it would also mean that they're going to start losing parking.
If you're going to facilitate that need, you don't need any larger than 8 feet. 8 feet is perfectly fine.
Well, and 8 feet will allow the pedestrian and
Exactly.
bike access. And another point that came into it, Mr. Skinner, is almost all the properties along 407 east of 7 Mile are in some manner, not all of them, but many of them, a golf cart can get to them without a multimodal trail. And we also, what was it? Was P&Z in the golf cart meeting? Okay, we identified the areas of the city that could, where golf carts could go under current city law. And they can't go on any 35-mile-hour roads, but there are areas where they can sneak in on non-35-mile-an-hour roads to get to 407.
Also to that point, though, the corner, Highland Road and 407, assuming that we made changes to our codes allowing those on our streets, those don't need a 12-foot path for multimodal. As you said, going east from that location, there's many places you don't need it, especially beyond the current development on the corner where Painted Tree is.
Mm-hmm.
There's an interconnection in the developments heading east,
Heading east, right.
so you don't need the 12-foot.
The cross-access.
Likewise, on the going west from Selmeyer, those have interconnections as well. From the restaurants, I believe it's Lost Colony to the bank, and then beyond through the Bowery development and on to the east. Those are all interconnected, so the need for a 12-foot along
Yeah,
407
yeah.
is really not, there's not a heavy need for it, because we have the access in other forms for golf carts, right?
And our long-term goal is for access to all retail via multimodal, and that can happen by way of the 12-foot trail, or it could happen to many areas if there were some golf cart regulations changed.
Correct.
But our goal, because that's not in our purview to change any
Right.
laws, so our goal is within 10 years that we will, well, it's the 20-year plan, but within 10 years that 95% of all commercial can be accessed, and within 20, we're just filling in a few little gaps.
Okay. And then one final question from me, if you will. The existing right-of-way on 407, and this goes back to our last conversation when it was presented, we talked about
Right.
the proximity of the path to 407. As I drive 407, I noticed there's a lot of the utilities are set pretty far back. Is there additional easement space for the TxDOT to expand that roadway, or is that the maximum size it's going to go?
Their plan is that is the maximum size that it would go. And you're right, if you look at the utility poles, in fact, Ron and I were looking at that this morning, it's pretty tight right there.
Yeah.
And the plan is that stays as it is right now.
Okay, so TxDOT has no future plans for it. Their maximum that road's going to handle is what, 35 or 45,000 vehicles a day? And we're below the capacity at this point? Okay.
Yeah, at this point we are, but at some point we won't be.
Okay. All right.
And to your point, I want to say Brian, but I think I'm supposed to say Mr. Freeland.
You're okay.
Is there are some easements that the city can work with the property owners because there's existing easements. And also, for you particularly, I want to let you know, we did redo several areas of the trail to increase the distance between back of curb and edge of trail where we could,
Okay.
based on land mass away
Right.
from the road.
Okay, okay.
So I thought that particular comment was an excellent one, and we've reworked the trail to maximize that distance.
And that is reflected in the, for lack of a better term, 500-page document that was sent? Okay. It's a big document.
And we have one more implementation slide, Rachel. And I'm glad we've had some questions. And at this point, because council has to go to their meeting in 4.5 minutes, then any questions that are remaining, Phil, should those go through Lori, or can they just contact us directly?
I think it'd be easier to give those through me.
That way the city has a record of all the questions. So send any questions that you may have. And not only from today's meeting, but over the next 2 weeks. And you do have, make your way up, Rachel. You do have 2 weeks to make responses. And for us to stay on schedule, we had to kind of have a deadline in order for us to respond to those comments. And during the response time, we need to meet with Paul and maybe staff to look at those comments on how we address the comments. So Rachel, wrap us up with implementation.
Great, thanks, Ron. All right, and this implementation slide is primarily for those folks wonder what's next if this plan is adopted by council. What does that mean? What does it mean for me and our community? So there are 3 ways to implement a plan. The first is by policy guidance and action. So that is the document. It is a policy guidance. It is not code or law. So there are no you must do's or you shall do's. There is no repercussions if things don't get implemented necessarily from a regulatory or a jurisdictional perspective. And action.
Just real quick, so just to make sure we're all 100% clear, if 10 years from now somebody comes and wants to develop the Bishop property somewhat along the lines of what y'all have proposed, if planning and zoning and council said, yeah, we don't like that, and voted no, that's a future council making that decision is not going to be subject to a lawsuit, correct?
That's correct, unless you change your zoning or your development code or your ordinances around the recommendations of that opportunity area plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So that's the second way to implement the plan, is by actually making amendments to your zoning laws and development codes of ordinances, and that is enforceable by law. And then the third way is through capital projects and funding sources. So these are things like if the action is we need to construct a multi-use path from point A to point B, then you would need to develop a cost proposal for this, integrate it into your CIP, and then go out and execute the plan. So we just wanted to make that very clear in terms of what this document can be used for and how it can be implemented. So the prioritized action items will become part of a staff work plan. They will budget for improvements. That's where the CIP comes into place. The plan updates will be based on current events and trends. So this is where we talk about the plan being a guiding document, a living document. So as things within the community change with regard to resources or funding availability, staff, trends, world events, this plan can also evolve and change. And then the implementation of the actions need to be brought before residents, staff, planning and zoning, and council. So with that, I think we're out of time for questions and discussions.
Yeah, hang on, though. I do have a question for you, Paul, and this, and maybe Kevin, this is as well. So we've gone back and forth and talked about changes, and they've made subtle changes and so forth. What is the process if council wants to make a wholesale change, like just scratch something completely out or just remove something or whatever? What is that process? Do we do that when we're doing the actual motion and putting it in place, say we're going to do this but we're going to remove this, or we want to do that ahead of time?
I would say we want to do that ahead of time to make sure
I would
all the
too.
work is done. Yes.
So where and when and what is the process for that?
So I would say at this point, if there's any issues here that we really want to take a hard look at that maybe we need to change, let's have another meeting and talk about that. If there are those items, get that information to me so we can kind of plan that out moving forward.
Okay, because, we just been kind of kicking it around. There's things in there, and I know they're only recommendations, and we don't have to do it. But I don't see a point if the public is not happy with something, why would even bother putting a recommendation in if we're not going to look at it, or we don't like it, or they don't like it. So for instance, if I wanted to recommend, we say, hey, if there's anything in there that says multifamily, get rid of it. Just as an example, that's something I would like to take a look at and just get it out of there. And so that way we don't have to worry about this down the road. And there's nothing stopping councils in the future to change that or do whatever, because this isn't a document of law. And I think the other question that Dan and I just kind of hit us when we were having a sandwich was the transit district overlay. Is that something we could get out of there with this document on this, or is that a planning and zoning change?
The overlay, Kevin can help me on this one as well. It's not a specific zone.
I know, but
So
it's
it's not a
causing.
rezoning of a property.
Okay, so it's something we could use this document to remove if we wanted to, because it's.
We'd have to pass an
Okay.
ordinance.
Okay, and that's fine.
That's
So that would be separate.
that's an ordinance, so it's an ordinance. And
Because they are current zoning regulations, we would have to amend
Okay.
the zoning ordinance.
That's-
to
Okay.
delete it now. You could kind of use this as a basis to lead into the reasons for doing it.
Right. Well,
Assuming you wanted to.
and I'm going down the same path here, because that was something that a previous council did just to throw it out there for the future, and it's been nothing but a pain for us for the last 10 years. And if that's something we want to toss, now's the time to do it, guys. And well, the ladies on planning and zoning aren't here, but that's what I'm talking about. So,
And to both of your points, that was really a goal of mine when we started this process, is that we would have a comprehensive plan. And at the end of that, if one of these property owners was ready to develop, we could point to the plan and say, this is what's in the comprehensive plan. And then everybody's on the same page when it goes to Planning and Zoning Commission, and it goes to City Council, it goes smoothly through that. And the debate's been done.
I'm sorry, were you referencing the transit-oriented district?
yes.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I had a cold, my apologies. Actually, that one has not been enacted by ordinance. That was just an amendment to the old comprehensive plan.
So we can make an amendment to the new comprehensive plan to make it disappear if we wanted
First,
to.
I want to say, because I now understand the question, because I can now hear you. And again, I apologize because I've had a cold for
That's
a
okay.
week and a half. And so actually deleting it from this document would effectively delete it and hope, because this document will in effect, in large part, replace the original document. It's not, I know we're not doing a completely full detailed comprehensive plan because of the build-out situation, but I think you could effectively use this document to delete that if the council so desired.
Okay. So I want to know. Thank you.
Can you go back one slide? Sorry, we got to make it quick, Sean.
Yeah, we got to go.
I don't have a question, I just wanted to see. Sorry. Okay.
We want to thank you for your time and look forward to comments and interaction and how we can keep moving ahead with the comp plan updates. And so thank you very much. And anything that you have, please go through the city manager's office, and we will certainly address things as quickly as possible.
All right. I thank you all for the presentation. And just for those in the audience and watching online, just please remember as we move through this over the next several weeks, there are opportunities for the public to respond and provide their input to members of council through email or direct conversation, as well as planning and zoning members, as well as staff members. So utilize those tools to reach out to us so that we can advocate on your behalf. With that, the city council portion of the meeting is adjourned.
Dan, real quick, and
Planning and
also
Zoning
through Speak
Commission
Up Highland
adjourned.
Village.
Yeah, also speak up.